Rugged, fearless, and born for the spotlight, this Hollywood legend lived a life as bold as the characters he played. A war hero with battle scars and a rebellious streak, his off-screen story was filled with danger, secrets, and a fight for survival. Behind the tough guy roles was a man whose real-life experiences were more gripping than any script, making him an unforgettable figure in American cinema. Childhood and early experiences. Lee Marvin was born on February 19, 1924, in New York City, and right from his birth, he was no ordinary man. He was born into a family with quite the pedigree. His father, Lamont Waltham Marvin, was an advertising executive, while his mother, Courtney Washington Davidge, was steeped in Southern tradition. Courtney was described as being highly educated, artistic, and highly socially active, which is perhaps why she had such high expectations of Lee. Young Lee was not one to conform to such a stereotype, though. Lee was a rebellious child who made life rather unpredictable for his parents. His mother used to tell him that he was as wild as they come, and she was not far from the truth. He was very friendly but had some rebellious streak in him which made him resist anything that seemed structured. This led to many conflicts at home, especially with his father, who was rarely home due to his job. But when he was home, he did not like Lee's reckless behavior. Lee also had an older brother, Robert Marvin, who would go on to have a more conventional career in advertising. At the same time, Lee was to go somewhere else, somewhere far beyond the glossy life his parents led. School was not an easy thing for Lee to go through, but this was not because he was not intelligent. He was intelligent, but he lacked the discipline to attend school and follow the set programs and regulations. Lee transferred from one school to another in New York, and he was always getting into trouble for not obeying the rules. In fact, he got expelled more than once, and it did not take long for teachers and administrators to label him as a troublemaker. His problems in school were not so much intellectual but behavioral. Lee was not a learner who could sit in a class or follow orders from those in authority. He was much more comfortable outside, where he could escape the rigor of the academic environment. Although Lee's parents, especially his mother, wished him to do well, the latter had other plans in mind. Finally, in 1942, he decided to quit prep school, and this decision did not go down well with his parents. However, even though dropping out of school appeared to be as radical as it could be, it was, in fact, a turning point for Lee. The same year, at the age of 18, he took one of the biggest decisions in his life. He joined the U.S. Marine Corps. As World War II was in progress, Lee felt that the military was the means to escape from the purposeless life. His father fought in World War I, and that may have influenced his decision, but the major reason was that Lee wanted to fight. Leaving school was not the only option. Becoming a Marine was a way of directing all the rebelliousness that he had been bottled up for years. He did not know that this decision would have a profound impact on his life and the lives of the characters he portrayed. The rough and rugged soldier who went to war would return with experiences that would transform him as an individual and, at the same time, shape the kind of characters he would portray in Hollywood. Military service, a transformative journey. When Lee Marvin joined the U.S. Marine Corps in 1942, he was 18 years old, but he was to be shaped by events which were to transform him. He joined at a time when World War II was on, and like most youths of his generation, Marvin had the urge or the need to do something big or be part of something bigger than what he was. It is also important to note that the war was to bring him physical and emotional trauma that was to affect him for the rest of his life. Marvin was transferred to the Pacific Theater, which was one of the most active fronts during the Second World War. He was to be stationed in the 24th Marine Regiment of the 4th Marine Division. His unit fought in places that most people probably never even heard of, such as Kwajalein Atoll and Eniwetok. However, it was the Battle of Saipan that was to become Marvin's war. Marines then landed on Saipan in June 1944, and this became one of the most vicious battles of the Pacific. Marvin was right in the middle of it, fighting and experiencing a lot of action and seeing horrific things. This was the time that Marvin was badly wounded in the battle. A sharpshooter managed to shoot him in the sciatic nerve, and the man was a very lucky man to be alive. Most of the men around him did not. He later described being evacuated from the field, half stupefied and in agony, and believing he was going to die. It not only meant the end of his days as a Marine, but also a Purple Heart and a return to the States for several months of convalescing. Though the physical injuries of Marvin were treated, the psychological injuries were much more severe and profound. He came back from the war a different person, burdened with the things that he was a witness to and had to endure. War had happened, and like many of the soldiers, Marvin was confused about what he had to go through. Although he did not express much of the effects of the war in terms of feeling in his public speeches, it is evident that the memories of the war affected him for the rest of his life. His wartime experience did not only affect him as a person, but also as an actor and a performer in his career. While watching Lee Marvin on screen, it becomes impossible to ignore the glint in his eyes, his body language, or the rawness that appeared to exude from every tough guy's character he portrayed. That was not a drama. That was the real thing. His acting, particularly in war movies or other roles that required him to be a macho man, was real because he had been there and done that. It was not very far-fetched for Marvin to portray these roles because, in one way or the other, he had been through them. Marvin's wartime experience lent believability to films like The Dirty Dozen and The Big Red One. People felt he represented soldiers, mercenaries, and hard-boiled characters honestly. It wasn't acting, which would have been simple. He knew from experience. Marvin never talked about the war in public, but when he did, it was usually with pride, resentment, and anguish. In an interview, he claimed that the war had removed the glitter of heroism. It was harsh and terrible, scarring the body and soul. "It's something you never forget," he stated in one of his few military confessions. He didn't want to talk about it, but the conflict was still part of him. Note that his character's shells were hard, like his post-war shield. Even though he never talked about performance stress, his shows were louder than his speeches. Lee Marvin was tough, but the war also made him a contemplative man few knew. Whether in war or on screen, Marvin's war experience shaped the legend and American cinema, acting career, from humble beginnings to stardom. Lee Marvin was not a lucky man who had a straight and smooth path to stardom, and he had a bumpy and winding road full of pits. After his military service, Marvin went back to New York City and tasted a little of the acting industry. He started his acting career in New York theater, where he got small roles in different theatrical plays. His first roles were small and unnoticeable, but they gave him the sense of acting and did not let him get idle. New York theater was not quite right for Marvin's raw energy and tough exterior, so he decided to try his luck in Hollywood. In the early 1950s, he collected his belongings and left for the West, with the intention of getting a job in the movie business. He had to face a few dark years in Hollywood, which was not as bright as the light bulbs of the Hollywood sign. He started his acting career by performing minor roles in television dramas and films, and the majority of them required him to portray rough personalities, which eventually became his trademark. His first major role was in 1953 with the movie The Big Heat, which was a film noir directed by Fritz Lang. In The Big Heat, Marvin played Vince Stone, a gangster with a hint of the killer instinct in him. He was very energetic, and it did not take him long to get a break for his ability to portray threat and realism in his characters. This was a very important role in the career of Marvin, as it showcased his potential to play complex anti-hero characters. From this, it was evident that Marvin had a screen persona that was different from most of the leading men of the period. As for The Big Heat, it is possible to note that Lee Marvin's career began to grow after the movie. His handsome looks and energetic performance caught the eyes of directors, and he was getting better parts in big films. Among the great events of his career, one can point to the movie The Dirty Dozen, which was a war action picture. In this film, Marvin plays the role of Major John Reisman, a strict military officer who is given the task of training a group of reckless men for a very crucial mission. His authoritative manner of playing the character and the energy he put into the role made it possible for the character to be memorable, and he was placed among Hollywood's great male actors. Marvin proceeded to succeed and reach the top of his career. The next year, he starred in Cat Ballou, a successful Western comedy that showcased his acting skills. The film starred Marvin as charming, eccentric Kid Shalene and deadly killer Tim Strawn. His Oscar for Best Actor was for his excellent dual performance. Marvin won due to flexibility and popular acceptance of his skills. Point Blank, a hard-boiled action picture, helped Marvin establish his image as a tough guy. In this film, Marvin played Walker, a misled man who pursues revenge. He was realistic and passionate, like his character, a guy on a mission. The film's success gave Marvin another career highlight, proving he can carry a film with his charisma. Being a real person set Marvin apart from other actors of his period. Marvin generally played disturbed, harsh characters, unlike his colleagues. This rawness gave Hollywood a new realism by depicting actual life. He wasn't just acting manly, he'd overcome many obstacles. One of Marvin's professional milestones was winning an Oscar for Cat Ballou. He became a Hollywood legend by constantly accepting parts that required him to use his body and emotions. All his performances were convincing, strong, and sensitive. Marvin gave his characters depth and credibility, so his success was not just a fad, but an actual phenomenon in American cinema. In Hollywood history, Lee Marvin is unique. From extra to one of his generation's most popular actors, his narrative is about skill and hard work. This generation can draw inspiration from his legacy as one of Hollywood's most beloved hard-boiled performers. Relationships and marriages. Marvin had a number of relationships in his personal life, including marriage with Betty Ebeling in 1951. The couple had 4 children together: Christopher, Courtney, Jennifer, and Pamela, who are twins. Their marriage lasted until 1967, a time when Marvin's career started to grow into what it was known for. However, the glamour of public life and the pressure of Hollywood and Marvin's career demands proved to be too much for the couple, and they separated. After separation from Betty, Marvin's love life was even more complicated, especially when he was involved with Michelle Triola. Marvin and Triola had a passionate on-and-off relationship that ended in a very much televised palimony case. In 1970, Triola took Marvin to court for palimony, claiming that she helped him financially when he was establishing himself as a musician. The case attracted media attention and exposed the challenges Marvin had to go through in order to manage his private and working life. Marvin had to face the problem of alcoholism during the entire period of his life. His struggle with alcohol impacted his work life and his personal life as well. People who knew Marvin said that he was not very stable when he had a drink, and this was an issue when it came to collaborating with him. Nevertheless, even when he was a successful man, his vices never seemed to be far behind. Marvin's alcoholism led to the breakdown of relationships and generated chaos in the environment that surrounded him. For instance, his second union with Michelle Triola was characterized by problems, which were partly attributed to his drinking. Still, the later period of Marvin's life was marked by his efforts to fight the addiction and to take his life into his own hands. Despite this, he was a very popular person to those who knew him in person, and his hardships only made the public image of him more appealing. Although Marvin's personal life was in turmoil, he managed to have some hobbies that helped him escape the pressure of Hollywood. He was a fisherman and a sailor by heart and preferred to spend most of his time in the great outdoors, probably to get away from the prying eyes of the paparazzi. Marvin was fond of these activities, and they helped him to get away from the limelight and be in touch with nature. He enjoyed outdoor activities, and these were not just leisure activities, but a part of who he was. He was able to relax and have some fun when he went fishing and sailing, which he could not do when he was in Hollywood. These activities were not mere hobbies. They were his salvation, enabling him to steer through the stormy seas of his relationships and employment, influence on film and popular culture. Lee Marvin's contribution to the world of cinema is immense, and his work has left a lasting impression on the action films and the westerns in particular. His depiction of anti-heroes altered the course of the genre from clean-cut superheroes of the previous films to more realistic and rough heroes. Marvin's characters were often complex, rough and often not very good, which was much more realistic and close to reality. This shift greatly impacted the portrayal of anti-heroes in film and opened the door for other actors to play similar characters with more depth. In westerns, Marvin introduced the real and rough tone that revived the genre. Cat Ballou and the Dirty Dozen are examples of when he managed to combine the comic and the tough hero, thus defining a new type of western and war movies. His approach was instrumental in changing the outlook of the westerns and making them less stereotyped. The same could be said about his work in war films, as Marvin added realism and toughness to the portrayal of soldiers and the war, which became a new benchmark for such films. On the cultural level, Marvin's legacy remains a representation of American toughness and manliness. His screen image, which can be described as a combination of macho and sensitive, sincere, affected many actors and directors. Later generations of actors have taken inspiration from his capacity to play intricate and raw characters, and filmmakers have borrowed his style and technique. Marvin's impact can be observed in how contemporary cinema approaches the issues of power and perseverance, which makes him an eternal legend of the American motion picture industry. When Lee Marvin grew old, his macho, rugged image of a man had to confront the fact of ill health. Marvin also had many health problems in his later years. He had emphysema and other problems which affected his health greatly. The disease, which was a lung-related disease, was a strong signal to him that his lifestyle and previous experiences had taken a toll on his body. Marvin also had some health problems, which were aggravated by the injuries he received during World War II. The injury received during the Battle of Saipan resulted in a severe wound, which caused some physical discomforts that time and time worsened his health. However, Marvin did not give up on films, and even though he was getting fewer and fewer roles, he still acted in films. His last works proved his unyielding creativity and passion to his work till the end. Among these, it is worth mentioning The Delta Force, an action film that let him demonstrate the spirit of a true He-Man for the last time. Marvin also did Gorky Park, a Soviet crime thriller, and this also showed that he was a versatile actor. These last shows were proof of his talent and energy until the end of his life and his illness. The fact that Marvin accepted these roles while he was in a very bad health state showed how much he loved his job and how he was not willing to let his condition hinder his work. The last films are viewed not only as interesting movies, but also as examples of his determination and passion for the acting profession. Lee Marvin died on August 29, 1987 of a heart attack and was 63 years of age at the time of his death. His death signified the end of a great career which had indeed contributed to the shaping of the American cinema. The manner in which he died was a wake-up call as to the effects of a reckless lifestyle and poor health. Condolences came from the movie industry to honor Marvin's great work in the movies and his special talent for adding dimensions to his characters. Colleagues, co-stars, directors, and fans mourned him as a powerful presence on screen and a talented man. Since his death, Marvin has continued to gain more popularity than he had before he died. His legacy in the motion picture industry and the culture at large has continued to be felt today, with film festivals and other events being organized in his honor. He has been awarded and recognized for his work and efforts to the advancement of cinema to date, so his work is not forgotten. Marvin's depiction of complicated characters and his contribution to action films and westerns are still popular among viewers and help to create new talents. His posthumous accolade is evidence of the continuing relevance of his brilliant career and the continued fascination with his hard-boiled image. Discover more about the enigmatic Lee Marvin by clicking the video on your screen. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more intriguing stories about Hollywood legends and hidden truths.